I want to say a huge thank you, Luke, for your time. I think as our unified communications expert, I'd be remiss if I didn't go to you with our next remote working blog checklist goal, which is, how do you think that businesses should best connect with their customers and collaborate with their staff?
So there's two elements to look at first. So, it's the internal communication, the external communication. So in talking internally with staff, you need to have a platform that's going to deliver on all of those ways that people like to communicate and what is the most efficient and effective way of communicating. So, of course, it needs to make calls. I think the biggest bugbear for a lot of people is email. Tend to allocate work, and the amount of communication that goes back and forth on email is draining sometimes. So having the ability to have another form of communication like live chat is so key. But when you're working remotely across the country, as well as already mentioned, video calls, it's got to be right up there. Meetings over the phone, just voice is great. You get the job done, but it's not very personal, and it's sometimes quite isolating. Then you come into external communication. So now is a great time to look at all of your channels. People always, look at their telephone system. That gets changed every few years and so, but that's great. But actually, what other channels are you using as well? Email, as I already touched on, it generally tends to sit in Outlook, and nobody sort of thinks about it. They might create a new email address every so often for something else as another distribution, but they never really think about actually how emails are being allocated and distributed, and actually how effective that channel is, because people don't tend to look at the statistics of it. How long does it take me to respond to an email? Nobody knows. And then, how else do we want to communicate with customers, or more importantly, how else do customers want to communicate with us? You don't know what you don't know. So if you say your customers don't want to talk to you over live chat, how do you know? So it's really good time to review all of the different channels that your customers want to speak to you on, and really giving them as much flexibility and as many choices out there to communicate with you to make it as easy as possible.
Okay, I'm going to start off. You've definitely nailed a really interesting point there that I definitely want to learn a bit more about now. Do you want to tell me a bit more about the Horizon Contact product, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's a new contact center platform for Horizon customers. And I think this is going to be really, really powerful for a lot of businesses out there that traditionally people see contact centers and think, I'm not a contact center, but they don't necessarily have loads of people crammed into a room, which I think is the sort of stereotypical perception of it. Actually, it's just the way that how you communicate with your customers most effectively across multiple channels is the real true description of what a contact center should be. So yeah, the new Horizon Contact platform gives the Horizon customer the ability to do that. So straight out of the box, so to speak, they get voice queuing and delivering those calls much more effectively through IVR. Then taking it into emails and the ability to queue those, not coming out of that sort of shared mailbox, and being able to actually allocate emails more effectively and track how long that they're taking to be responded to, and making sure that they're being distributed and picked up effectively. And then later we're going to be introducing live chat through the websites and also social media channels as well, which traditionally that would be potentially split across multiple teams. Those different teams might be communicating in different ways to each other, and equally just managed almost ineffectively and disjointed across the business.
As I'm aware that we've had a little bit of a part to play in the development of this solution, what's that been like? Have there been many partners? What's that process been like for you?
Yeah, it's been a really great process, actually. Really nice to be a part of something like this, and a true testament to the relationship that we have with Gamma. So 6 partners, as being one of those, have sort of been scoping the product and what the market needs to look like, and actually how that product should be built when it comes to market. And we're a bit of been a bit of a trialist to get the product to where it's ready for launch. And actually, it's not something that comes out for general sale until the start of Q2 next year. So actually, we're getting in there sort of early and making sure that the product's right for general release middle of next year.
So I mean, it all sounds very technical, but I get the feeling that it might be a little bit easier than perhaps I'm thinking it might be. If you've got a customer or business, perhaps on, I don't know, even on an old traditional telephony system, they're already considering moving to a hosted solution. I'm sure there are tons of businesses right now that are wishing they might have thought about a hosted solution maybe a few months prior to the beginning of this year. I mean, can you have some people on contact? Can you have some people on hosted telephony? How does it work?
Yeah, that just fits the shape and the size of that business, really. Most businesses that have a contact center have just a small team or proportion of their business that are on the contact center platform, and that's absolutely fine. You're going to have some users, maybe 5 out of the 20 users that are in the contact center team, and they get all of those great features to manage those different interactions and those different channels. But they're all connected ultimately underneath on the same underlying Horizon telephone system. So there's just fluid communication between both the contact center and the back office teams, as we call them.
And so does that work across if somebody does have multiple sites or people are working remotely? How would that help, with people working across the country?
Yeah, I mean, because it's a hosted telephony system and hosted contact center, sites are not relevant anymore at all. It can be a case of having that, everybody on one site. It could be that you've got a multiple site environment. It could be that everybody is working from home, as we tend to find ourselves at the moment. They're all ultimately connected to the same system in the cloud. So it doesn't matter at all where they're working. It's just where we're sending those interactions to, just the endpoint device, whether that be a soft client, a handset that they've got at home, or even like a mobile.
If you had to draw out what a contact center does, or if you had to have a workflow from customer communication coming into something happening and an action being made, is there a way that you describe in real layman's terms how that works and how that might benefit a business?
Yeah, so it differs depending on the communication channel, but email is the prime example, where traditionally businesses would have a shared mailbox in Outlook. As I mentioned, an email might come into that. There's no way to allocate that email to a person other than, sometimes people categorize it. Some people just forward it on to that person and say, could you pick this email up? But there's no real way to automate that or make that more efficient without somebody manually doing it. Whereas in a contact center platform, that then comes into a queue. A new email would come into a queue similar to a call would. Okay. You can then filter those off and send those emails different routes based on, potentially it could be the subject heading for the email, and that might go to one team, then you might have another one go to another team, and you can just manage that workload and it's automatically distributed. And it's a similar thing with voice and live chats as well. It's just the ability to allocate that workload a bit more efficiently, track, of course, all of the times that it's taking to do these interactions and respond to things, and just making sure that you're communicating with your customers completely effectively, which is so important nowadays.
So interesting. I'm going to pick you on one of those benefits that you just mentioned. You can actually track the time it takes from a communication coming in to somebody picking it up.
Yeah, absolutely. So how long it takes before somebody picks it up when it comes into the business, how long it takes them to then respond to it, and see all of the times around that.
Can you see any other visibility of other communications then? If it's all via the same platform, if I pick up an email that's coming, could I see what other communications somebody else has had before?
Yeah, that's a real good point about the contact center platforms. It's that historical view of it as well. Whereas traditionally, if an email came in and then a week later that customer then called back in and said, I emailed you, I would manually have to go and find that email, look it up on a system or in Outlook. But the whole point of that contact center being omni-channel with all of these different medias in one place is that I get a call in, instantly I'm presented with all of the history of what that customer has spoken to me about over recent weeks.
Amazing. That's really interesting. Thank you very much. Okay, perhaps we might then move on to the collaboration piece. So I can see how the contact center system might actually help, with the assignment of work and keeping things, accountable, keeping people accountable for their different workloads. So how is it that we can help businesses collaborate with each other internally and, I don't know, even with customers, etc.?
Yeah, so the collaboration tool that they're using, so like Horizon Collaborate is such a powerful way of doing that. I think the main thing for for businesses to almost adopt first is mentality change, and how they're going to communicate. Traditionally, it's send an email, pick up the phone. But with all of us working remotely in remote meetings all of the time, which are happening much more frequently than traditional in the office meetings or at customer site meetings are happening. Now, when you're working remotely, you can sort of have 8 meetings a day. So the ability to live chat between people, just drop them a quick message, it just makes it so much more efficient. And it potentially can feel quite isolating working remotely if you're not communicating or seeing people much more frequently as you would in the office. Just quick video call, much more personal, and it's just a great way to communicate regardless of where you're located.
Okay, cheeky question then. How has your work life improved or changed? Let's say changed since working remotely. Do you enjoy the virtual collaboration that we're able to have via these different platforms?
Yeah, you become much more efficient in my experience. So the amount of work completed throughout the day and the amount of meetings I can sit in is just increased tenfold compared to being in the office. Customer meetings, for example, you could spend a few hours driving up and down the motorway before you get that meeting, spend an hour in a meeting, then there's another couple of hours back to the office. Now that's just a case of clicking on a link, join the meeting. I could potentially do 3, 4, 5 of them a day. And equally, that ability just to send people quick messages, you just tend to find that you get so much more completed in a day and in a week, much more tiring at the end of it. Certainly, having the right tools in place makes you much more efficient.
Okay, so we've mentioned Horizon telephony, which we use internally at Welcomm as well. We talked about Horizon Contact, which is coming out this week. We talked about Horizon Collaborate, which again we use internally at Welcomm for video conferencing, chat, instant chat, and all of our calls, etc. So we can't get away from the Microsoft Teams conversation. Teams, I believe the adoption of Teams has gone up, insert number here, massive rate. So we also support customers with Office 365, etc. How are we supporting customers at this time with Microsoft Teams?
Yes, as you mentioned, it's gone up tenfold in however many months we've been working remotely now, and the adoption of Teams, it's just been massive, and it's a daily conversation that we have. People are using Teams for their collaborative tools for meetings and chats and things internally. But the next question is, well, how can I use that externally? How can I communicate with customers like that? And yes, you can do that in Teams with other people that are on Teams, but traditionally, and sort of natively with Teams, you can't just dial a number. So there's a few ways that we can achieve that now through a process called direct routing, where in very basic terms, we essentially connect a SIP trunk to a user's account, which gives them the ability to make a call to a number, or we can do that through integrating it into a telephone system. So there's a few out there that we can integrate with already, and also we're hopefully in the near future having an integration into Horizon as well.
Are there particular businesses then that would be more suited to using Teams or more suited to using Collaborate? Are there any use cases that might be really pertinent to share?
No, I mean, in terms of the collaboration ability, they share very much the same thing in terms of the communicating with people. Of course, calls, chats, meetings, that's the fundamental functionality of both of them. It really comes to what that business is doing for the rest of their processes. So if they're aligned to a lot of the Microsoft products that Teams has, of course, a great integration into, SharePoint and other applications in there. So if they're embedded within Teams and the Microsoft suite, then it's a great tool for them to use. But if a business isn't quite there, because Teams, if you've never used Teams, it's a great application, but it's not the easiest thing just to pick up and run with. So Collaborate, it's a great tool to give them collaborative functionality without some of the mind-bogglingness of Teams sometimes.
So if a customer is interested in dipping their toe maybe into the contact center space, maybe they've got hosted telephony already, maybe they don't, what do they need to do? What does it look like to get them started?
So yeah, it's a great time to review all of the different channels actually. People are generally finding that now's a great time to review the different services and systems they've got in, and people, as we've mentioned, are changing the way that they're communicating with businesses anyway. And it's not as daunting as people tend to think. Moving to new big products like this it's much easier than traditionally it used to be. Lots of consultation with our consultants. Our engineers guide it all the way through the process, and almost hand-holding through that training. It can be anything from administrator training to supervisor training on the reporting, and of course end user training. We're really there to guide the whole way through that process. And as I say, it's much less daunting than it used to be.
Maybe I might ask a really cheeky question then off the
Yeah.
bat. Why Welcomm?
Great question. So we're there to really consult with businesses, and we've got lots of products, lots of services out there. It's a big, scary market when you're going out looking for these things. There's lots and lots of different people and lots of vendors trying to sell you different things, but we're there, and it's a big part of my role to evaluate the market and look what's actually best for our customers, and then guide you into the right product. There's so many out there, and how do you pick one from the other? And we're there to review customer services, how they're working now, what they want to look like in the next 5, 10, 15 years or so, and help guide that consultation and buying process.
Huge thank you for your time, Luke. If you need any more information about any of our products and services, please do head to welcomm.co.uk. Alternatively, you can call our customer care team on 0800 064 6464. And I know Luke Stanton will be there to answer all of your queries via email if you so wish. The email address you can contact us on about the products or solutions that we've spoken about in this blog is unifiedsales@welcomm.co.uk. Many thanks. Check out more of these remote working checklist blogs coming in the next few weeks to help business owners tick off their remote working checklists.